Welcome back to my channel, everyone. If you are new here, welcome, and I genuinely mean it when I say you could not have picked a better moment to arrive, because what we are about to discuss today is one of those stories that starts in the most unexpected place and ends somewhere that will make you feel like the universe is doing something intentional with ParkJimin's existence. This is not a story about a chart record. It is not about a sold-out concert or a viral moment or a brand deal. This is a story about an ancient Korea scholar, a YouTube science channel, a BTS documentary, and an invitation to a museum that has people across the academic and cultural world talking about Jimin in a completely different way than anyone expected. So get comfortable. Because this one is layered, and every single layer is worth unpacking. Let's begin with the documentary, because that is where this entire story starts. On March 27, 2026, Netflix released BTS, The Return, a documentary that has since become one of the most watched non-fiction titles on the platform globally and one of the most intimate portraits of BTS that has ever been made publicly available. The documentary covers the period leading up to and following the group's full comeback, including candid footage of their time living together in Los Angeles during the recording of Ararang, their individual preparations for the Ararang World Tour, and deeply personal glimpses into each member's inner life during the transition from military service back to full group activity. Rolling Stone, who covered the documentary extensively, described it as revealing in ways that felt genuinely surprising even for a group that has been intensely documented for over a decade. And within all of that intimate footage, there is one specific moment involving Jimin that has taken on a life completely its own, far beyond the documentary's primary narrative, far beyond anything the production team could have anticipated when they included it. The scene is simple on its surface. Jimin is at home. He is eating takeout food alone, in the quiet, comfortable way of someone who genuinely loves his own company. He is engrossed in a science education show featuring archaeologists discussing ancient Korean history at a university. "These are the types of videos I like to watch when I'm eating or trying to sleep," he explains. "I like it when I don't have anything to do and don't have to work out. I wasn't always an introvert, but as I got older, it just happened. I could sit here for 10 hours alone. That is the moment. That is the scene that set everything in motion." Jimin, global pop star, sold-out stadium-filling member of the world's biggest group, Calvin Klein ambassador, Billboard Hot 100 chart topper, person whose name makes entire arenas erupt, sitting alone at home, eating his takeout, deeply absorbed in an educational archaeology program about ancient Korea. Not Netflix. Not a music show. Not a celebrity gossip channel. An archaeology documentary about his own country's ancient history. And that detail, that specific, unexpected, completely authentic detail, found its way to exactly the right person. Professor Kong in UK runs a YouTube channel called I Love Jimin Science Channel, a South Korean educational platform focused on archaeology and the ancient history of the Korean peninsula. Professor Kong is an archaeologist by training and profession, someone who has devoted his career to the study of ancient Korean civilizations, including the Silla Kingdom, one of the three kingdoms that shaped the Korean peninsula and whose cultural legacy is preserved in museums, royal tombs, and archaeological sites across what is now North and South Korea. When Professor Kong saw Jimin watching his kind of content in the BTS documentary, something clearly clicked. And his response was not to simply post about it or comment on social media. He did something far more meaningful. He extended a personal, professional invitation directly to Jimin. He said, in words that have since been translated and shared across every major fan platform, "Jimin, if you come, let's explore the museum together. There are sculptures from the ancient Silla civilization and some murals related to dance. Maybe that could give you inspiration for your performances. I want you to read that again and let every part of it land." An archaeologist who studies ancient Korea watched a BTS documentary, saw Jimin watching archaeology content in his private time, and responded by inviting him to explore a museum together, specifically mentioning the connection between ancient Silla art and dance, specifically suggesting that the cultural artifacts in those collections might serve as creative inspiration for Jimin's performances. This is not a casual social media comment. This is a scholar extending a genuine, professional, intellectually grounded invitation based on his assessment that Jimin's artistic interest in the roots of Korean movement and expression could be meaningfully deepened through direct engagement with the archaeological record of that tradition. That is extraordinary. And the ARMY community's response to it tells you everything about how deeply this landed. To understand why this moment is so significant, we need to understand both what it says about Jimin and what it says about the academic recognition his artistry is increasingly receiving. Let's start with Jimin himself. Because the image of Jimin that most casual observers carry around in their heads is the one from the stage, the one with the razor-sharp choreography, the stage presence that makes even seasoned critics reach for the word magnetic, the voice that Rolling Stone described as possessing a velvety quality and a nearly feline loverboy magnetism that stands out even in a group filled with virtuosic singers and strong presences. That is the public Jimin. The performer. The artist who makes 50,000 people in a stadium feel like he is performing specifically for each of them. But the private Jimin, the one that BTS, the return allows us to glimpse, is something different and something richer. He is a gentle homebody who washes his plates until they literally squeak, who points out the dish towel his mother gave him with quiet pride, and who chooses archaeology documentaries and science education content as his preferred watching material during downtime. He is someone who has grown more introverted with age. Someone who can sit alone for 10 hours and find that deeply satisfying rather than lonely. And crucially, someone whose intellectual interests run toward the ancient, the historical, the deeply rooted in Korean cultural identity. That is not the profile of someone who became a great dancer simply because of physical talent and dedicated training. That is the profile of someone who thinks about movement, who feels movement, who is drawn to understanding where movement comes from and what it means within the specific cultural tradition he was born into. And this is precisely the connection that Professor Kang recognized and responded to. Because the ancient Silla civilization that he studies is not merely a subject of historical interest for archaeologists. It is one of the primary cultural wellsprings of Korean artistic tradition, including dance. The Silla kingdom, which unified the Korean peninsula in 668 CE after centuries of conflict among the three kingdoms, was a society that placed extraordinary value on artistic and ceremonial performance. Silla court music and dance were forms of ritual communication, ways of expressing relationships between the human and the divine, between the ruler and the ruled, between the living and the ancestors. The sculptures and murals that Professor Kang specifically mentioned as relevant to Jimin, the ones depicting dance movements, ceremonial gestures, the physical vocabulary of ancient Korean performance, are not decorative objects. They are records. They are documentation of a movement tradition that has been flowing forward through Korean culture for over 1,000 years, changing form and expression but never entirely losing its connection to those deep roots. And Jimin's dancing, the specific quality of it that makes critics and fans and fellow professionals struggle to fully describe what makes it so singular, may be connected to those roots in ways that are not purely metaphorical. Jimin trained in contemporary dance before joining BTS. His background is not purely in the Western-influenced training systems that dominate mainstream idol preparation. He grew up absorbing Korean artistic traditions alongside international influences, and his movement has always carried something that observers consistently describe as both technically extraordinary and somehow deeply, specifically Korean in its expressiveness. The smoothness. The breath in the movement. The way the body seems to speak rather than simply execute. These are qualities that have antecedents in classical Korean performance traditions whose visual record is preserved in exactly the kind of artifacts that Professor Kang studies and that he suggested Jimin explore. The fan community's response to the professor's invitation has been everything you would expect from a fandom that pays close attention to what the people they love actually care about. The reaction was not screaming excitement, though there was plenty of that too. The deeper reaction was one of recognition. ARMY has always known that Jimin's artistry is rooted in something more than training and talent. They have watched him speak about dance not as a skill to be executed but as a language to be spoken. They have seen him push himself beyond physical limits not because a choreographer told him to but because he cannot accept performing something he does not fully feel. They have heard him describe finding himself through movement in ways that go far deeper than performance technique. And the idea of Jimin walking through a museum of ancient Korean civilization, looking at sculptures and murals that captured the movement vocabulary of his ancestors, finding there something that opens a new dimension of his already extraordinary artistry, that idea landed with the kind of emotional weight that makes a fandom fall silent before it starts screaming. There is also a broader context here that deserves to be acknowledged, because Professor Kang's invitation is not an isolated incident. It is part of a pattern of recognition that Jimin is increasingly receiving from worlds outside of music and entertainment. In June 2025, BTS's Jimin was featured on KBS's variety show Crazy Rich Korea under his segment titled Great Koreans Who Have Risen on the Global Stage alongside figure skater Kim Yoona, footballer Son Heung-min, and Parasite director Bong Joon-ho. He was placed in that company not because of his chart records alone, but because his impact on Korean cultural representation in the global space is now recognized at an institutional level that transcends any single industry. His solo exhibition The Truth Untold ran in New York City from May 31 to June 29, 2025, a solo exhibition that explored the stories behind his solo albums Face and Muse, and that a fan who attended multiple times described as one of the most magical experiences of their entire year. That is an artist whose work is being engaged with at the level of a solo gallery exhibition. Not merchandise. Not a fan experience event. An artistic exhibition in New York City where the content is the depth and honesty of his creative process. And alongside all of that, the exhibitions, the institutional recognition, the KBS feature alongside Korea's most celebrated cultural figures, there is now this, an archaeologist, looking at footage of Jimin watching ancient Korean history content in his private time, seeing something that felt like a genuine intellectual and artistic kinship, and reaching out across the distance between academic scholarship and global pop stardom to say, come to the museum, let's look at this together. That is the story. And everything about it is true. Jimin watches archaeology content in his spare time. Professor Kong noticed. Professor Kong invited him. The ancient sculptures of the Silla Kingdom might hold something that Jimin's performances are already, in some deep and intuitive way, drawing from. And the world of scholarship, the world of cultural heritage, the world of ancient Korean history and the people who spend their lives trying to preserve and transmit it, that world is reaching toward Jimin now, recognizing in him something that connects the contemporary global moment to the deepest roots of Korean artistic tradition. In BTS, The Return, Jimin described being an introvert who could sit alone for 10 hours. He described the archaeology show as the kind of content he loves. He said it quietly, without performance, without expecting anyone to find it remarkable. But someone did find it remarkable. Someone with the knowledge and the professional standing to understand exactly why it matters that ParkJimin, in his private, unguarded moments, chooses to spend his time with the ancient history of Korea. And that someone extended an invitation that has since become one of the most moving and most unexpected stories of the entire BTS comeback era. ARMY has always seen all of Jimin. The performer and the homebody. The artist and the introvert. The global pop star who quietly watches archaeology documentaries while eating takeout. And now, a scholar of ancient Korea has seen it too. And invited him home, to the museum where the dance tradition that lives somewhere in his body began, thousands of years ago, in the movement language of the Silla Kingdom. If this story moved you the way it moved me, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment below. Did you catch that moment in the documentary? And what do you think it would mean for Jimin's artistry if he actually visited that museum? I want to hear everything. I read every comment. And I will see you in the next one. Purple Heart.